This video is to show how to identify a healthcare worker in VATAS from the timesheet profile, and also a few things that you need to know when posting time on a timesheet for a healthcare worker. So I'm going to go ahead to my Select Employee menu, and I'm going to find my healthcare worker. So I'm going to go ahead and check the box, and I'm going to go ahead and scroll down here to the timesheet profile. So a few things that you need to look for to identify a healthcare worker. One of them is the premium pay indicator. Now, for a healthcare worker, that is always going to be either an S or a T. It's going to be an S for your regular healthcare workers, and it's going to be a T for those healthcare workers that are also entitled to on-call. Your user type is going to be A, Title V, and the US code indicator is going to show K for hybrid. Now, your type of appointment is going to vary for your healthcare workers, but it should never be a 5 or a 6. A healthcare worker is always something other than a 5 or a 6. Now, if we scroll down to the flag, some of the things that you need to identify is that the night differential will show as true. The Saturday premium flag should show as true for your healthcare workers, along with your Sunday flag should also show as true. And your tour differential flag will show as false, and that's because your healthcare workers are only entitled to night differential when they are working from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So now I'm going to show you some things on the timesheet itself. So I'm going to go back out here, and I'm going to show you the timesheet summary for this employee. So you can kind of see that there are a few errors on here, so I wanted to kind of talk about why the timesheet is showing these errors. So for the first one, it's showing that this employee had scheduled overtime. I just want to talk a little bit about the difference between scheduled overtime and unscheduled overtime. For a Title V employee, they are only entitled to night differential if the overtime is scheduled in advance of the administrative work week. And the administrative work week starts on Sunday. So the employee would have to be told in advance of that work week that they are going to be working this scheduled overtime, and that's when they would get night differential. But they are only entitled to the hours between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. So the reason why VATAS is showing this error right now is because there's 5.5 hours of night differential posted, and it should only be 4, because it should only be from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., which would be 4 hours of night differential. And that's why VATAS is giving that error on that day. Then for the next day, this is unscheduled overtime. This means the employee was not told by Sunday that they were going to have to be working overtime on this day. So in this case, this employee is not entitled to any night differential at all. So that is why VATAS is giving this error. So the timekeeper would need to go in and remove this 4 hours of night differential. Now you notice too, this employee also got called back on this day from 8 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Again, since this is callback overtime, and callback overtime cannot be pre-scheduled, then this employee is not entitled to any night differential on this day. Another thing that I wanted to point out is this employee does have Saturday overtime posted on this timesheet. For a healthcare worker, they are entitled to weekend premiums if they are working a tour or if they are covering a tour for someone else. So I just wanted to scroll down really quick and just show you that for this particular overtime, the timekeeper did put in that they were covering a tour for Bob Smith. And so in that case, they are entitled to the Saturday premiums. But again, they have to be either on a tour that day or covering a tour for someone else. So you notice on Sunday, they have overtime callback posted. And again, they are not covering for someone. So in this case, they're not going to be entitled to the Sunday premiums. They are only going to be entitled to the actual callback because they are not covering a tour for someone else. So if we go into the actual timesheet itself for this employee, and if we go ahead and fix that night differential on those 2 days, so again, this is one where the overtime was scheduled, so the employee is entitled to the night differential, but again, only from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So in this case, it's from 6 to 10, so they only get 4 hours. So we went ahead and changed that. And then this next one, again, this was unscheduled, not scheduled in advance of the administrative work week, so they are not entitled. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off. And then now I can go ahead and validate this timesheet because the overtime is now correct with everything that this employee is entitled to. So now I'm going to go out and I'm just going to show you a part-time employee. Again, the rules are the same as far as the night differential and the weekend premiums, but there is one thing that I want to show you on this part-time employee. So this employee only works 20 hours each pay period, and the timekeeper has gone in and has entered an overtime request for this day off on Friday. Well, if you can see, VATAS is giving an error, and that's because the employee needs to follow the rules of they only are entitled to overtime if they are working more than 8 hours in a day, or 40 hours in a week, or 80 hours in a pay period. So in this particular case, this employee did not reach any of those criteria. He's only working 28 hours in the first week. So you really have to be careful when you're posting for a part-time employee that you want to make sure that they have reached the criteria of in order to meet the overtime regulation. So if you're ever posting for a part-time employee and you get that error, you would have to go back and have that overtime reverted back to pending. Go ahead and cancel that overtime, and you would want to just post this time on here as just RG time instead of overtime because it's not meeting the overtime requirements. So now one last person that I want to show you is an intermittent healthcare worker. So I'm going to go ahead and find my intermittent healthcare worker here. Again, I'm just going to show you the timesheet summary first. So in this particular case, now this is kind of the opposite of what I just showed in the other one. So this one, the employee did work over 8 hours in a day. And you notice that VATAS is giving this warning saying overtime entitlement exists on January 22nd. So anytime you have an intermittent employee that is working over 8 hours in a day, you want to make sure that you are coding this time as overtime when it reaches over 8 hours in a day. And again, this particular employee came in on a Saturday. They are covering for someone, so that's why they are entitled to the Saturday overtime. Now, an intermittent healthcare worker will never be entitled to night differential, whether the time is scheduled in advance or not. An intermittent employee, an intermittent healthcare worker will not get night differential. And I'll just show you that really quickly on the actual timesheet itself. If you actually try to go in and post night differential for this employee, if I just try to put the 4 hours here and hit save, it's going to let me know that this employee is not entitled, and it's going to remove it by the system. So that's the basic things that you need to know for posting for a healthcare worker. Another thing to keep in mind is that your healthcare workers, when they have crossover tours, you may need a temporary schedule. Now there's a video out there also on the timekeeping site that goes in and explains everything that you need to do to set up the schedule for those employees that do have crossover tours. So if you have someone that falls into that scenario, please make sure to watch that video about how to set up a crossover tour for your Title V healthcare worker. Thank you for joining me in this video.